My mother left me a voicemail at 8 p.m. on a Sunday. Her voice was ice cold as she said, "Tiana, you are out. Do not come back. We are moving on as a family without you." I listened to it twice, then I typed a single word reply. Okay. I did not cry or scream. Instead, I opened my laptop and canceled the construction contract on the $2.5 million mansion I was building for them. I locked the family trust fund and disabled every credit card in their wallets. By the next morning, I had 50 missed calls and a frantic message from their lawyer saying we have a serious problem. But before I tell you how I brought my toxic family to their knees, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach someone the hard way that access to you is a privilege, not a right. The humid Atlanta air clung to my skin as I stepped out of my truck. I had just driven 4 hours straight from a commercial construction site in Savannah, and my boots were still caked with red Georgia clay. My back ached and my eyes burned from exhaustion, but I smiled as I reached for the large leather tube in the back seat. Inside were the finalized blueprints for the manor. It was a sprawling $2.5 million estate I had spent the last 3 years designing and financing. It was supposed to be the retirement home for my parents, Otis and Bernice. A thank you gift for raising me. Or so I told myself to justify the crushing financial weight I had carried since my 20s. I walked into the backyard of my parents' current house, a modest brick ranch in Decatur that I had secretly bought from the bank 5 years ago when they faced foreclosure. The air smelled of charcoal and expensive perfume. My mother Bernice was holding court near the grill wearing a silk dress I had paid for. My father Otis was tending the ribs, but the laughter died the moment I unlatched the gate. My sister-in-law Brittany was the first to speak. She sat on a lawn chair sipping wine, her blonde hair perfectly styled in stark contrast to my messy bun. She wrinkled her nose as I approached. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," Brittany said loud enough for the church deacons to hear. "You look like you rolled in dirt, Tiana. I hope you did not bring that smell near the food." My brother Marcus sat next to her laughing. He was 35 years old and still waiting for his big break as a music producer while living in our parents' basement. He high-fived his wife. "Come on, babe, give her a break. Someone has to work like a mule so we can live like kings, right, Tiana?" I ignored them and placed the foil-wrapped tray of premium ribs I had bought on the table. Brittany peeked under the foil and scoffed. "Store-bought. I guess you were too busy playing in the mud to cook something real for your mother's birthday." I took a deep breath and swallowed the retort, burning my tongue. Today was not about the ribs. It was about the blueprints. I tapped the leather tube against my leg. "Happy birthday, Mama," I said, trying to catch my mother's eye. I brought the final designs. The permits were approved this morning. "We can break ground next week." My mother barely glanced at me. She was too busy admiring the diamond earrings Marcus had given her. Earrings I knew he bought with the emergency credit card I gave him for car repairs. "That is nice, Tiana," she said dismissively. "Put them on the table. We are eating." But Brittany perked up. She snatched the tube from my hand before I could protest. "Let me see. I want to make sure the lighting is right for my content." She unrolled the large sheets of paper right over the potato salad. Her eyes scanned the complex architectural lines I had agonized over for months. Suddenly she frowned. "Wait a minute." Brittany pointed a manicured finger at the master suite on the second floor. "This is wrong. Why is the master bedroom facing east? The morning sun will ruin my sleep schedule. And where is the yoga studio? I told Marcus I needed a dedicated space with floor-to-ceiling mirrors for my wellness brand." I stepped forward, my patience thinning. "That is the master suite for Mom and Dad." I explained, keeping my voice calm. "It faces east because Dad likes to drink his coffee while watching the sunrise. And there is no yoga studio because this house is for my parents, not for you, Brittany." She let out a sharp laugh and looked at Marcus. "Did you hear that, babe? She thinks this is for them." Marcus stood up, wiping barbecue sauce from his mouth. Actually, Tiana, we need to talk about that. Brittany is pregnant. We need the space more than Mom and Dad do. They are old. They do not need 5,000 square feet. Marcus leaned over the table, his breath smelling of cheap beer. Plus, Tiana, look at this layout. It is cold. It is sterile. You call yourself an architect, but you have zero eye for aesthetics. This looks like an office building, not a family home. You are so obsessed with structure you forgot about soul. That is why you are still single, sis. You do not know how to make things warm. Brittany giggled and rested her head on his shoulder. Exactly, babe. We can fix it, though. We will just knock out this wall here for the nursery and turn the library into my content creation room. Tiana can just redraw it. It is not like she has a husband to go home to or anything. She has plenty of free time. I looked at my parents expecting them to shut this down. I expected my father to say that this was his dream home. I expected my mother to defend the gift I was working myself to the bone to provide. Instead, my mother set down her wine glass and smoothed her dress. She looked me dead in the eye with a coldness that made the summer heat vanish. Your brother is right, Tiana, she said. Marcus and Brittany are starting a family. They need stability. You are single. You are always traveling for work. You do not understand what a family needs. I felt the blood drain from my face. Mom, I am paying for this house. The down payment alone was $400,000 from my savings. I designed it for you, not for Marcus to host pool parties. My mother stood up then. She walked over to me and poked a finger hard into my chest. It does not matter who paid for it, she hissed. Family money is family money, and as the matriarch I decide how it is used. We have decided that the deed to the manor will be in Marcus and Brittany's name. It will be their legacy. You have a job. You can take care of yourself. In fact, I have the transfer papers right here. She pulled a folder from her purse and slammed it onto the picnic table next to the ribs. Sign them, Tiana. Sign over the rights to the construction contract and the land. Do it now as a birthday gift to me. Or are you so selfish that you would deny your unborn nephew a home? The audacity was so breathtaking I almost laughed. They wanted me to sign over a multi-million-dollar asset to my unemployed brother and his wife, who openly despised me. I looked at the papers, then I looked at my father. He looked away, studying the coals in the grill. He would not help me. He never did. I picked up the folder. Brittany smirked already, picturing her yoga studio. I looked at Marcus, who was grinning like he had won the lottery. Then I looked at my mother. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. I am not signing anything. If this house is not for you and Dad, then there is no house. I will cancel the project. I tossed the folder back onto the table. It slid across the wood and landed in the bowl of potato salad, staining the crisp legal documents with yellow mustard. My mother's face turned a shade of purple I had never seen before. She trembled, not with sorrow, but with pure, unadulterated rage. You think you can tell me no, she whispered, her voice shaking. You think your money makes you the boss of this family. You are nothing without us, Tiana. Nothing. The silence that followed was shattered by my mother's scream. She grabbed the wine glass she had set down and hurled it against the patio stones, shattering it into 1,000 glittering shards near my boots. You ungrateful child! She shrieked, her face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. After everything we did for you, we put a roof over your head, we tolerated your arrogance. And this is how you repay us. You are jealous. That is what it is. You are jealous because Brittany is a wife and a mother, and you are just a lonely, bitter woman with a drafting table. You cannot stand to see your brother happy. You want him to struggle just because you are miserable. Marcus stepped forward, chest puffed out, acting the part of the protector for the first time in his life. Watch how you talk to Mom, Tiana. Sign the papers or get out. We do not need your attitude here. We do not need your negative energy around my unborn child, Brittany chimed in, rubbing her stomach theatrically. Exactly. Stress is bad for the baby, Tiana. If you cannot support this family, then you are just an enemy. I looked at them. Really looked at them. The greed in Brittany's eyes. the entitlement in Marcus' stance, the hatred in my mother's face. I realized then that I was not a daughter to them. I was a resource, a bank account with a pulse. When the resource refused to yield, they tried to break it. I am not jealous, Mom. I said, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. I am exhausted. I am tired of funding a lifestyle for Marcus that he refuses to earn himself. I am tired of you acting like my money is your birthright. How dare you? Bernice lunged forward, her hand digging into the pocket of her dress. She pulled out a jagged piece of metal attached to a cheap plastic tag. It was the spare key to my apartment in the city. The modest one-bedroom apartment in a rough neighborhood that I rented specifically to keep up the appearance that I was struggling just like them. I never let them see my real life. I never let them see the penthouse. She threw the keys at me with all her strength. They hit my cheek, leaving a stinging scratch before falling into the red dirt. "Get out," she spat, pointing a trembling finger at the gate. "Get out of my house. If you are not part of this family solution, you are not part of this family. You are dead to us until you sign those papers. Do not come back until you learn your place. Do not come back until you are ready to apologize to your brother and give him what he deserves. Go back to your little apartment and think about how lonely you are going to be without us." I bent down and picked up the keys. I wiped the dirt off the silver metal. I looked at my father one last time, hoping he would say something, hoping he would step in. He just turned his back and started scraping the grill. The message was clear. I was alone. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply nodded. "Understood," I said. I turned around and walked toward the gate. I could hear Brittany laughing behind me. She probably thought she had won. She probably thought I would be back tomorrow begging for forgiveness, checkbook in hand. But she was wrong. This was not a timeout. This was a funeral for the daughter they thought they knew. I walked to my truck, my boots heavy on the pavement. The evening sky had darkened, heavy storm clouds rolling in to match the turbulence in my chest. I tossed the blueprints into the back seat, where they landed with a hollow thud. As I started the engine, the first drops of rain began to splatter against the windshield, fat and aggressive. I pulled out onto the road, leaving the house and the laughter of my family behind me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I focused on the road ahead, the red taillights of other cars blurring slightly as the rain intensified. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat, vibrating against the leather. It was a voicemail notification. I waited until I was merged onto the interstate, the rhythm of the tires on the wet asphalt providing a steady background noise, before I reached over and tapped the screen. The message played through the truck speakers, my mother's voice filling the cab. It was not the screaming voice from the backyard. It was worse. It was cold, calm, and utterly final. "Tiana, you are out. Do not come back. We are moving on as a family without you. We do not need your money or your attitude. We will find a lawyer to make you sign those papers, because that house belongs to us. You are dead to us until you fix this. Do not even think about stepping foot in my house again." The message ended with a sharp click followed by silence. I listened to it twice to make sure I heard every word, to make sure the bridge was truly burned, to make sure there was no ambiguity, no room for misinterpretation. She had disowned me. She had drawn a line in the sand and pushed me to the other side. For years I had feared this moment. I had worked myself to exhaustion, paid their bills, bought their love just to avoid this exact rejection. But now that it was here, I felt something unexpected. I did not feel devastation. I felt clarity. I opened my contacts list. I scrolled past Mom and Dad. I scrolled past Marcus. I found the number for my personal attorney, a shark of a man named David, who charged $600 an hour and was worth every penny. I did not call him yet. Instead, I opened my messaging app and pulled up the thread with my mother. Her last message to me from 3 hours ago was a demand to pick up ice on my way over. I typed 4 letters, OKAY. I hit send. Then I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and merged onto the express lane heading toward downtown Atlanta. toward my real life, toward the penthouse they did not know existed, and toward the button that would detonate their entire world. The rain lashed against the glass, washing away the red clay dust from my truck, but it could not wash away the resolve hardening in my heart. They wanted to move on without me. Fine. I would give them exactly what they asked for, and I would make sure they understood the true cost of their independence. I drove into the city, the skyline lighting up the dark clouds ahead, ready to begin the end. The drive to Buckhead took 30 minutes. I pulled my truck into the private underground garage of the St. Regis residences, parking next to my other car, a Porsche Panamera that my family had never seen. I took the private elevator up to the 25th floor. The doors slid open directly into my foyer. This was my real life, not the cramped, drafty apartment on the south side that I kept just for show, just to keep their demands manageable. This was 3,000 square feet of marble glass and silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Atlanta skyline, the city lights glittering like diamonds against the velvet night. It was cool, clean, and entirely mine. I kicked off my muddy boots at the door, leaving them on the mat. I did not turn on the main lights. The glow from the city was enough. I walked straight to the kitchen island, poured myself a glass of aged whiskey, and opened my MacBook. I did not feel sad. I did not feel conflicted. I felt like a surgeon preparing to cut out a gangrenous limb. It was going to be messy, but it was necessary for survival. I logged into my primary banking portal, the screen populated with numbers that would have given my mother a heart attack. I navigated to the tab labeled Family Trust and Expenses. It was a complex web of automatic transfers, standing orders, and supplementary credit cards that I had set up over the last decade. They called it Supporting Family. I looked at it now and saw it for what it truly was, a parasite feeding on a host. I cracked my knuckles and began. First, the mortgage on the Decatur house. My parents thought they were paying it. In reality, their contribution barely covered the interest. I had been paying the principal and the property taxes for 5 years, since I bought the note from the bank to save them from foreclosure. I clicked on the autopay settings. Cancel, confirm. Next, Marcus car insurance and the lease on his Range Rover. He told his friends he was a brand ambassador. The truth was, I was the brand and he was the liability. I located the vehicle financing portal. Stop payment. Report as unauthorized user. Confirm. Then the credit cards. My mother had a black card for emergencies. A quick scan of the recent transactions showed emergencies apparently included a $3,000 visit to Saks Fifth Avenue and a spa day at the Four Seasons. I hovered the mouse over the freeze card button. I did not hesitate. Click. The status changed from active to frozen. I did the same for the cards held by my father and Marcus. Finally, the utilities. Power water, high speed, fiber internet, the premium cable package with all the sports channels my father loved. All of it was in my name, paid from my account. I opened the Georgia Power portal. Scheduled disconnection. Reason property vacated by account holder. Date immediate. I leaned back in my chair, taking a sip of whiskey. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, but for the first time in my life, it did not feel lonely. It felt like armor. I watched the progress bar on the screen as the cancellations processed one by one. Somewhere across the city, in a house I technically owned, the digital walls were closing in. They wanted to move on without me. I was just helping them pack. I clicked on the transaction history tab, and the screen filled with a long list of payments that read like an indictment of my own stupidity. It was a digital crime scene where I was both the victim and the enabler. I scrolled back to the first of the month. The first entry was a debit of $2,800, labeled Decatur Mortgage Service. I remembered the day I set that auto pay up 5 years ago. My father Otis sat at the kitchen table with his head in his hands, weeping because the sheriff had taped a foreclosure notice to the front door. They had 3 months to vacate. I bought the note from the bank the next day. I saved their home. I saved their dignity. They thanked me by pretending the house was still theirs, and treating me like a tenant in my own property. I scrolled down. Land Rover Financial Services. $1,450. That was the lease on Marcus' SUV. I closed my eyes, and the memory played out vividly. Marcus begging me for the car, saying he needed the right image to sign artists for his record label. He promised to pay me back as soon as his first artist went platinum. That was 3 years ago. He had not signed a single artist. Instead, he used the car to drive to the country club and impress his friends while I paid for the premium gas and the insurance that cost another $400 a month. Then came the charges that made my stomach turn. They were under the supplementary card ending in 4098. Authorized user Brittany. Neiman Marcus $4,200. Sephora $600. Lululemon $350. The dates aligned perfectly with the day she made fun of my work boots and told me I needed a makeover. She had stood there in my parents' backyard wearing a designer silk blouse and holding a luxury handbag that I had paid for while mocking the very work that funded her lifestyle. She treated me like a peasant while spending my money like a queen. I opened the calculator app on my desktop. I started punching in the numbers. Mortgage, car notes, insurance. The utility bills for a 4,000 square foot house, the credit card bills for my mother's spa days and Brittany's shopping sprees. The cash transfers to my father's account for his investments, which were really just covers for his bad poker habits. I hit the equals button. The number stared back at me, stark and horrifying. $15,342. That was the monthly cost of my family's love. I was spending over $180,000 a year after taxes to support people who just told me I was not good enough to sit at their table. I was not a daughter or a sister to them. I was a walking ATM. I was their retirement plan, their emergency fund, and their venture capitalist. And in return, I got insults, exclusion, and a voicemail telling me to get lost. I looked at the total one last time. Then I moved my cursor to the button labeled Manage Authorized Users. It was time to give them the one thing they claimed they wanted: independence. Back at the ranch house, the party had swung into full gear. With Tiana gone, the air of tension had evaporated, replaced by the intoxicating fumes of unearned victory. Brittany sat at the head of the picnic table holding a glass of sparkling cider like it was Dom Perignon. She was FaceTiming her best friend back in Buckhead, the screen illuminating her smug face. You should have seen her face, Jessica. Brittany laughed, her voice shrill and carrying across the yard. She actually thought she could tell me no. She looked like a construction worker who got lost on the way to a dumpster fire. And those ribs, I would not feed that meat to a dog. Marcus was busy playing the role of the lord of the manor. He leaned against the railing of the deck, gesturing grandly to the empty space where the overgrown hydrangeas grew. I am telling you, bro, he said to his cousin Dante. The pool is going to go right there. Infinity edge, heated. I am going to have a swim-up bar installed too. Tiana tried to cheap out on the landscaping, but now that I am in charge, we are doing it right. I am thinking imported palm trees. Make it look like Miami. Dante nodded, sipping a beer he did not pay for. That sounds tight, man. But what about the money? Marcus waved a dismissive hand. Tiana handles the bills. I handle the vision. That is how it works. She knows better than to cut off the supply. She just needs a little time out to remember who is actually the favorite. Inside the kitchen, Bernice was humming a gospel tune as she wrapped up the leftovers. She felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The confrontation had been ugly, yes, but it was necessary. Tiana had been getting too big for her britches lately, too independent. She needed to be reminded that her success was family property. Otis walked in, grabbing a piece of cornbread. You think she will sign the papers? He asked, his mouth full. Bernice chuckled, wiping down the counter. Of course she will, Otis. She always does. Remember when she wanted to go to art school in Paris? I told her no, and she cried for a week, but she stayed here and went to Georgia Tech like I said. Remember when she tried to move out at 22? I told her good daughters do not leave their mothers, and she stayed another 3 years. She leaned against the sink, looking out the window at the dark silhouette of the trees. Tiana is weak, Otis. She craves my approval like oxygen. She will pout for a day or two. She will sit in that little apartment of hers and realize how lonely she is without us. By tomorrow morning, she will be back here with an apology and a checkbook. She probably went straight to her office to draft the transfer deed tonight. I raised her to serve this family. She does not know how to do anything else. Otis nodded, satisfied with the logic. Good. Because I really like that east-facing master suite. I am going to put my recliner right by the window. Bernice turned off the kitchen light, plunging the room into darkness. Sleep well, Otis. Tomorrow we start packing. We are moving on up just like the Jeffersons. They went to bed that night with smiles on their faces, dreaming of marble floors and velvet drapes, completely unaware that the ground beneath them had already turned to quicksand. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved for this exact moment. It rang once. David, my attorney, answered, his voice crisp and alert despite the late hour. He was the kind of lawyer who slept with his phone on his chest and billed in 6-minute increments. Tiana, he said. It is Sunday night. This better be billable. It is, I said, leaning forward in my leather chair. I need you to execute the nuclear option. I want to activate the termination clause on the Williams Family Trust, effective immediately. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the rustle of sheets as David sat up. He knew what this meant. He had drafted the trust documents himself, structuring them so that I retained sole revocation power as the grantor. Are you sure? He asked, his tone shifting from annoyed to professional. This is a bell you cannot unring. Once I file the dissolution paperwork, the assets are frozen. The monthly stipends stop. The credit cards linked to the trust will be declined. It is a total financial blackout. I am sure. I said, my voice steady. They told me I was out, so I am taking my money with me. Cut them off, David. Everything. I want the accounts frozen by the time the banks open tomorrow morning. I want the supplementary cards canceled tonight and draft the eviction notice for the Decatur property. They are living there on my dime without a lease. I want them out in 30 days. Understood, David said. I could hear the clicking of his keyboard in the background. He was already working. I will file the electronic motions now. The credit card companies have a 24-hour emergency line. I will have the cards bricked within the hour. As for the eviction, I will have a process server ready to deliver the notice tomorrow morning at 10. Anything else? Yes, I said. Prepare a cease and desist letter for Brittany. She has been using my name to get discounts at local boutiques. That stops now. Consider it done, David said. Get some rest, Tiana. Tomorrow is going to be a war. I hung up, but I was not done. I opened my email and found the contact for Henderson Construction. It was too late to call the office, so I called the owner directly on his cell. He answered on the fourth ring, sounding groggy and confused. Ms. Williams, is everything okay? Is there a problem with the site? There is no site, I said. Mr. Henderson, I am exercising the cancellation clause in our contract. The Manor project is terminated, effective immediately. Stop all work. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Terminated. He stammered, but Ms. Williams, we just poured the foundation for the guest house. The steel beams are arriving tomorrow morning. We have 50 guys scheduled to work. Tell them to stay home, I said, cutting him off, or send them to another job. I do not care. I am pulling the funding. I will pay the cancellation fee stipulated in the contract, but I want all construction activity to cease right now. I want your equipment off the lot by noon tomorrow. If I see a single bulldozer on that property after 12, I will consider it trespassing. But the materials, he protested. The custom marble, the imported windows. Return them, I said. Sell them. Use them for firewood. I do not care. Just clear the lot. I am not paying another cent for a house that will never be built. Send the final invoice to my lawyer. I ended the call before he could argue further. My hand was shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally taking control. I had just set fire to a $2.5 million dream, but as I looked out at the Atlanta skyline, I did not feel a sense of loss. I felt lighter. The manor was never really a dream. It was a cage, and I had just melted the key. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of the master bedroom in Decatur. Bernice stretched under the duvet, feeling refreshed and victorious. She had slept the sleep of the righteous, convinced that her wayward daughter was currently sitting in a cramped apartment, regretting every disrespectful word she had spoken the night before. Today was a day for celebration. Bernice showered, dressed in her favorite linen pantsuit, and drove her Mercedes straight to the Waldorf Astoria Spa in Buckhead. She had a standing appointment for a diamond facial and a deep tissue massage. It was her weekly ritual, a reward for being the glue that held the Williams family together. She walked into the lobby, the scent of eucalyptus and lavender instantly soothing her nerves. The receptionist, a young woman named Sarah, smiled nervously as Bernice approached. "Good morning, Mrs. Williams," Sarah said. "We have you down for the full package today." Bernice nodded, placing her heavy Chanel bag on the counter. "Yes, darling. And add a glass of champagne to that. I am celebrating." Sarah typed something into the computer, then hesitated. "I will need a card on file for the incidentals today, Mrs. Williams." Bernice waved a hand dismissively and pulled out the heavy black Amex card Tiana had given her 5 years ago. "Just use this one. It is the one on file." Sarah swiped the card. A sharp beep echoed in the quiet lobby. She frowned and swiped it again. Beep! Bernice tapped her manicured fingernails on the marble counter. "Is there a problem, Sarah? My appointment starts in 5 minutes." Sarah looked up, her face flushing pink. "I am so sorry, Mrs. Williams, but the card is being declined. It says do not honor." Bernice let out a short, incredulous laugh. "That is impossible. That card has a $50,000 limit." "Run it again. And make sure you are doing it right this time." Sarah tried a third time. The result was the same. "I am sorry, Mom. The system will not accept it. Do you have another form of payment?" Bernice felt the eyes of the other patrons on her back. 2 women in robes were whispering near the water fountain. Heat crept up Bernice's neck. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, snatching the card back. "It is obviously a system error on your end. I will call the bank and sort this out. I expect my room to be ready when I am done." She marched to a corner of the lobby and dialed the number on the back of the card. She tapped her foot impatiently as the automated system connected her to a representative. "This is Bernice Williams," she hissed into the phone. "I am at the spa and my card is not working. You need to fix it immediately." The representative on the other end typed for a moment. "I see the issue, Mom. This card was reported as unauthorized by the primary account holder early this morning. The account has been closed and you have been removed as an authorized user." Bernice froze. "Excuse me," she whispered. "The primary account holder, Ms. Tiana Williams, initiated the cancellation. We cannot reactivate the card without her direct authorization." Bernice hung up the phone, her hand shaking with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Tiana, that spiteful little girl, she was actually trying to play hardball. Bernice looked at the black card in her hand. It was just a tantrum. That was all it was. Tiana was lashing out, trying to embarrass her mother to prove a point. She probably thought that by cutting off the money for a few hours, she could force an apology. Bernice shoved the card back into her purse. She would not give Tiana the satisfaction of seeing her sweat. This was just a glitch, a temporary inconvenience. Tiana would turn the card back on the moment she realized her mother was truly upset. Bernice walked back to the counter, her head held high. "There is a fraud alert on the account," she lied smoothly. "My daughter is sorting it out. I will come back tomorrow when the bank has fixed their mistake." She turned on her heel and walked out, leaving the confused receptionist behind. She sat in her car and gripped the steering wheel. "Two can play at this game, Tiana," she muttered. "But you are going to lose." At 7 in the morning, Marcus strolled out of the house wearing a crisp white polo and designer sunglasses. He was whistling, feeling every bit the successful mogul he pretended to be. Today was a big day. He was meeting his friends at the exclusive East Lake Golf Club for a round of 18 holes, followed by lunch. He had bragged to them all week about his new mansion, his impending business ventures, and his general dominance over the Atlanta social scene. He walked up to his Range Rover, the black paint gleaming in the morning sun. It was his pride and joy, a symbol of the success he had never earned. He pressed the unlock button on his key fob. Nothing happened. He frowned, pressing it again harder this time. The car remained silent and dark. Maybe the battery in the key was dead. He pulled the manual key out of the fob and unlocked the door, the alarm chirping once in protest. He climbed into the driver's seat, the leather still smelling new, and pressed the start button. Instead of the powerful roar of the engine, the dashboard lit up with a flashing red message. Vehicle disabled. Contact lender services. Authorization revoked. Marcus stared at the screen, confusion wrinkling his forehead. What kind of nonsense was this? He tried again. The same message blinked back at him, mocking his impotence. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel. Piece of junk, he muttered. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number for Land Rover roadside assistance. A cheerful voice answered. Thank you for calling Land Rover. How can I help you today? Yeah, my car will not start, Marcus barked. It is giving me some error message about authorization. Fix it. I have a tea time in 45 minutes. Can I have your vehicle identification number, sir? The agent asked. Marcus rattled it off, impatient. There was a long pause on the line. Sir, I am seeing a flag on this account, the agent said, her voice losing its cheer. This vehicle has been reported as a repossession risk due to unauthorized use. The leaseholder has revoked permission for any secondary drivers and initiated a remote disablement protocol. Leaseholder, Marcus scoffed. I am the leaseholder. My name is Marcus Williams. Actually, sir, the lease is in the name of Ms. Tiana Williams, the agent corrected. She contacted us this morning to report that the vehicle was being operated by an unauthorized party. She has requested immediate recovery of the asset. A tow truck has been dispatched to your location. It should be there within the hour. A tow truck. Marcus felt a cold sweat break out on his forehead. You cannot tow my car. I have clubs in the trunk. I have meetings. This is a mistake. Call her. Tell her to turn it back on. I am afraid I cannot do that, sir, the agent said firmly. The order is legal and binding. Please remove your personal belongings from the vehicle before the recovery team arrives. Have a nice day. The line went dead. Marcus sat in the silent car, his heart pounding against his ribs. Tiana. She had actually done it. She had turned off his car like it was a toy. He looked out the window, half expecting to see her truck parked down the street watching him. But the street was empty. She did not even need to be here to humiliate him. She could destroy his life from an app on her phone. He scrambled out of the car, grabbing his golf clubs from the trunk, just as a large flatbed tow truck turned the corner, its yellow lights flashing. The driver, a burly man with a clipboard, hopped out. You Marcus? He asked, not waiting for an answer. Hand over the keys, buddy. The bank wants their ride back. Marcus stood on the curb, clutching his golf bag, watching his status symbol being winched onto the truck. His neighbors were watching from their porches. His friends were texting him, asking where he was. And for the first time in his life, Marcus realized that without Tiana, he was just a man with a heavy bag and nowhere to go. At 8:30 in the morning, Otis was sitting in his favorite recliner, watching sports highlights and dreaming about the media room he was going to have in the new house. He imagined a 90-inch screen surround sound and a mini fridge stocked with imported beer. He smiled to himself, thinking about how lucky he was. Most men his age were worrying about their 401ks, but he had Tiana. Or rather, he had the results of Tiana's hard work, which he had convinced himself was the same thing as his own success. The phone on the side table rang, shattering his reverie. He picked it up, expecting it to be one of his poker buddies. Instead, a gruff voice barked into his ear. Is this Otis Williams? This is Henderson from Henderson Construction. Otis sat up straighter. Mr. Henderson, good morning. Are you calling to update me on the foundation pouring? I was just telling my wife we need to come by and see the progress. There is no progress, Mr. Williams. Henderson said, his tone clipped and angry. There is no foundation. There is no house. My crew is packing up right now. We are pulling the excavators, the rebar, the whole operation. The project is dead. Otis blinked, confusion clouding his mind. Dead? What are you talking about? Did something happen with the permits? We can fix that. My daughter knows people downtown. It is not the permits, Henderson snapped. It is the money. Your daughter called me last night. She exercised the termination clause in the contract. She pulled the funding, Otis. She canceled the whole thing, said she is not paying another dime for a house that nobody deserves. Those were her exact words. Nobody deserves. Otis felt his chest tighten. But that is impossible. That house is fully funded. The money is in the trust. Tiana cannot just cancel it. It is our house. Actually, it is her house. Henderson corrected him. Her name is on the contract. Her name is on the checks. And right now, her name is mud with my subcontractors because I have to tell 20 guys they do not have work for the next 6 months. If you want to build a house, Mr. Williams, feel free to write me a check for $2.5 million. Otherwise, stay off the property. We are locking the gate when we leave. The line went dead. Otis sat there, the phone still pressed to his ear, the dial tone buzzing like an angry insect. Cancelled. The word echoed in his head. The manor, the media room, the east-facing master suite, all of it gone with a single phone call. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his denial. He dialed Tiana's number, his fingers fumbling over the keypad. It rang once, then went straight to voicemail. The automated voice was cheerful and professional, a stark contrast to the disaster unfolding in his living room. You have reached Tiana Williams. Please leave a message. Otis hung up and dialed again. Voicemail. He tried a third time. Voicemail. She had blocked him. Or turned off her phone. Either way, she was gone. He stood up, his knees shaking. Bernice! He called out, his voice cracking. Bernice, get in here. We have a problem. A big problem. He looked around the modest living room of the ranch house, the house he had been so eager to leave. Suddenly, the walls felt very close. The silence felt heavy. And for the first time in a decade, Otis realized just how precarious his comfortable life really was. Tiana was not just pouting. She was not just throwing a tantrum. She was burning the kingdom down. And they were all trapped inside. I did not pick up the phone. I did not even look at the screen when it lit up with the 51st call. It was 9 a.m., and I was sitting in my corner office at Davis & Associates, reviewing blueprints for a new eco-friendly office complex in Midtown. The sunlight streamed through the glass, illuminating the architectural models I had built with my own hands. This was my sanctuary, a place where structure, logic, and merit ruled, a place where I was respected not for my bank account but for my brain. But my phone was a grenade on the mahogany desk, vibrating with the chaotic energy of a family in freefall. I had set it to silent, but the notifications kept stacking up like debris from a landslide. I glanced at the lock screen. It was a fascinating case study in human psychology. At 6:30 a.m., the messages were commands. From Bernice, fix this now, Tiana. The bank made a mistake. Call them immediately. From Otis, Henderson says you canceled the contract. Tell him he is lying. I want that foundation poured today. From Marcus, my car is gone. Get it back or I am calling the police for theft. By 7:30 a.m., when they realized I was not responding, the tone shifted to rage. Bernice, you ungrateful wretch! How dare you embarrass me at the spa? I will drag you out of that office by your hair. Marcus, I hope you rot. You think you are better than us. You are nothing. Just a lonely, bitter spinster. By 8:30 a.m., as the reality of their situation began to sink in, the desperation set in. Otis, please, baby girl. Just call us back. We can talk about this. Mom is crying. She did not mean what she said. Marcus bro, just turn the car back on. I have a meeting with a label exec. This is my big break. Do not ruin this for me. And now at 9:15 a.m. came the manipulation. A text from Brittany popped up. Tiana, I am having severe cramps. The stress is hurting the baby. If something happens to my child, it will be on your hands. I need you to come over and help me get to the doctor. Marcus is too upset to drive. Please, do not punish an innocent baby because you are mad at us. I stared at the message. It was a classic move, weaponizing her pregnancy, using an unborn child as a human shield. A year ago, I would have dropped everything. I would have rushed over, driven her to the best OBGYN in the city, paid the copay, and bought her lunch afterwards to soothe her nerves. But today, I saw it for what it was. A trap. A ploy to get me back in the room so they could gang up on me again. So they could force me to sign those papers. I did not reply. Instead, I took a screenshot of the message and emailed it to my lawyer, David, with the subject line documentation of harassment. Then I turned my phone face down. Let it buzz. Let them scream into the void. I had a deadline to meet. I had a team of junior architects waiting for my feedback. I had a life to live. And for the first time in 32 years, that life did not include being the emotional janitor for a family that treated me like trash. The vibration against the wood of the desk was a constant reminder of the chaos I had left behind, but it was also a reminder of my power. I had the control, and I was not giving it back. While my family was imploding in a spectacular fashion across town, I was sitting in the glass-walled conference room of Davis & Associates, having the best morning of my career. Mr. Davis, the senior partner, stood at the head of the table, beaming like a proud father. He tapped a spoon against his coffee mug, calling the room to order. I have some news, he announced, his voice booming. The city council just voted. The Midtown Eco Hub project has been awarded to us. And it was Tiana's design that clinched the deal. The room erupted in applause. My colleagues were patting me on the back, shaking my hand, offering genuine congratulations. Mr. Davis walked over and handed me a heavy cream-colored envelope. And with this win comes a new title. Ladies and gentlemen, please meet our newest junior partner. I stood up smiling until my cheeks hurt. This was what I had worked for. The late nights, the weekends spent drafting while my family partied, the sacrifices. It was all validating in this single moment. I shook Mr. Davis' hand, feeling the weight of the promotion settle on my shoulders. It felt good. It felt earned. In my pocket, my phone buzzed against my hip. It buzzed again and again, a constant frantic rhythm that tried to drag me back into the mud. I ignored it. I drank the sparkling cider someone had popped. I ate a celebratory donut. I discussed timelines and budgets and ribbon-cutting ceremonies. I was a professional. I was a partner. I was untouchable. When I finally retreated to my new corner office to pack up my things, I pulled the phone out. The lock screen was a wall of desperation. 50 missed calls. The notifications were a timeline of escalating panic. 10 a.m. from Brittany. I am cramping, Tiana. The stress is causing complications. If I lose this baby, it is murder, and you are the killer. 10:15 a.m. from Marcus. The tow truck driver laughed at me. You humiliated me in front of the whole neighborhood. Fix this now or I swear to God. 10:30 a.m. from Bernice. Your father is having chest pains. Do you want him to die? Pick up the phone, you heartless girl. I looked at the messages and felt nothing. No guilt, no fear. I knew my father had a clean bill of health from his checkup last week because I paid for it. I knew Brittany was lying because she had posted a video of herself dancing on TikTok an hour ago before realizing she was supposed to be in distress. I knew Marcus was only embarrassed because his facade had cracked. They were drowning, and they wanted to use me as a life raft. But I was not a raft. I was the ocean, and I was done holding them up. I swiped the notifications away, clearing the screen until it showed only my background image, a photo of the Paris skyline. I put the phone face down on the desk. Then I picked up my pen and signed my new contract, My hand did not shake. At 10 a.m., a heavy fist pounded on the front door of the Decatur ranch house. Bernice jumped, dropping the lukewarm cup of tea she had been nursing. The kitchen was silent and grim. The power had been cut an hour ago, and the hum of the refrigerator had died, leaving an oppressive quiet in its wake. Otis sat at the table staring blankly at the wall, his earlier bluster about contacting the mayor entirely evaporated. "I will get it," Bernice snapped, wiping tea off the counter with a paper towel. "It is probably the power company. I am going to give them a piece of my mind." She marched to the door, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. She smoothed her hair and practiced her most intimidating scowl. She yanked the door open, ready to scream. Standing on the porch was not a utility worker. It was a tall man in an ill-fitting gray suit holding a thick manila envelope. He looked bored. "Bernice Williams?" he asked, looking at a photo on his clipboard, then back at her. "Yes. Who are you?" Bernice demanded, blocking the doorway with her body. "If you are selling something, we are not interested. And if you are with the power company, you are about to hear from my lawyer." The man ignored her threats. He thrust the envelope toward her chest. "You have been served," he said, his voice flat and professional. Bernice instinctively grabbed the envelope. "Served? What is this? Is this about the car? My son is handling that. It was a misunderstanding." "It is a notice to quit," the man said, turning to walk away. "And a notice of termination of tenancy at will. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Have a nice day, ma'am." He was halfway down the walk before Bernice found her voice. "Vacate!" she shrieked. "You are crazy. I own this house. We have lived here for 30 years. You cannot evict me from my own property." The man stopped and turned back. He gave her a pitying look. "You might want to read the deed, Mum. You have not owned that house since the foreclosure proceedings 5 years ago. The current owner is TW Holdings LLC. They are exercising their right to remove occupants." He got into a sedan and drove away, leaving Bernice standing on the porch clutching the envelope like it was a live grenade. She walked back into the house, her legs feeling like jelly. "Otis," she whispered. "Otis, look at this." Otis looked up as she tossed the packet onto the table. He put on his reading glasses, his hands shaking. He tore open the seal and pulled out the legal documents. The header was in bold black ink. "State of Georgia. Magistrate Court of DeKalb County. Dispossessory warrant." He scanned the lines, his eyes widening with every word. "Plaintiff TW Holdings LLC. Defendant Otis and Bernice Williams. Reason for eviction, termination of tenancy. No lease agreement. TW Holdings," Otis muttered. "Who is TW Holdings?" He flipped to the second page where the property ownership history was attached as an exhibit. His breath hitched in his throat. There it was, a transfer of deed dated 5 years ago. The bank had sold the distressed mortgage to a private investor just days before the auction. The signature at the bottom of the purchase agreement was familiar. It was elegant, sharp, and undeniable. "Authorized signatory Tiana Williams." Otis dropped the paper. "It is her," he wheezed. "It is Tiana. She bought the house, Bernice. 5 years ago. When we thought the bank made a mistake and let us stay. It was her. She paid the arrears. She paid the taxes. She owns the roof over our heads." Bernice snatched the paper from him. "No, that is impossible. She would have told us. She would have used it against us. She is using it against us now." Otis said, his voice rising in panic. "Look at the date, Bernice. We have 30 days. 30 days to get out. We do not have a lease. We do not have rights. We are just guests. And she just kicked us out." Bernice stared at the signature. The daughter she had called a failure, the daughter she had dismissed as merely a wallet, had held the ultimate trump card for half a decade. Tiana had not just paid their bills, she had owned their entire existence, and Bernice had just thrown her out. Now Tiana was returning the favor. The walls of the house, which had always felt like a fortress, suddenly felt like a cardboard box waiting to be crushed. The living room of the ranch house, felt like a war room bunker. The eviction notice lay in the center of the coffee table like a declaration of war. Bernice paced back and forth, wearing a path into the carpet, while Otis sat with his head in his hands, muttering about where they would go. The air was thick with panic, but underlying it was a poisonous vein of fury. They did not see themselves as people who had done wrong. They saw themselves as victims of a daughter who had forgotten her place. "We have to call her," Otis said, his voice trembling. "We have to beg. If we apologize, maybe she will rescind the notice. Maybe she just wants to hear us say we were wrong." Bernice stopped pacing and whirled on him. "Apologize? For what? For expecting our daughter to support her family? For wanting a nice home for our son? I will never apologize to that ungrateful girl. She is trying to humiliate us, Otis. If we beg now, she will own us forever. We need leverage. We need to remind her who made her who she is." Marcus was sitting in the corner, scrolling furiously on his phone. He looked up, a malicious glint in his eyes. "Mom is right. We do not beg. We attack. Tiana cares about her reputation, right? She is all about her image, her fancy firm, her awards. That is her weak spot." "What are you thinking?" Brittany asked, rubbing her stomach. She looked less like a pregnant woman in distress and more like a predator spotting prey. "We take this to the court of public opinion," Marcus said, standing up. "We blow it up on social media. I have 5,000 followers on Instagram. You have your mommy blog, Circle Brittany. We tell the world what she really is, a rich, heartless landlord kicking her elderly parents and her pregnant sister-in-law onto the street. We do not mention the trust fund or the money she gave us. We just focus on the cruelty, the eviction, the abandonment." Brittany smiled slowly. It was a cold, calculating expression. "I like it. And we lean into the optics. Me, a pregnant white woman being bullied by a wealthy corporate shark. The internet loves to defend a mother-to-be. I can cry on camera. I can talk about how the stress is hurting the baby, how I am terrified of being homeless. People will eat it up. They will flood her employer with calls. They will cancel her. She will be begging us to take the house just to make it stop." Otis looked uneasy. "Is that safe? Tiana has lawyers. If we lie, she could sue us for defamation." "It is not lying, Dad," Marcus argued. "It is storytelling. She did kick us out. She did cut off the money. We are just framing it correctly. Besides, what choice do we have? Do you want to live in a shelter? Because that is where we are headed in 29 days if we do not break her." Bernice looked at the eviction notice, then at her son, her golden child. He was fighting for the family in a way Tiana never had in her eyes. He was taking charge. "Do it," she commanded. "Make it hurt. Make her ashamed to show her face in this city. Make everyone know that Tiana Williams is a monster who hates her own flesh and blood." Brittany pulled out her phone and adjusted her ring light. She messed up her hair slightly to look more distressed and pinched her cheeks to create a flushed, tearful look. "Get the tissues, Marcus," she said, her voice dropping into a practiced wobble. "It is showtime. Let us see how Tiana likes being the villain in her own story." The video went live at noon, just as the lunch rush was hitting downtown Atlanta. Brittany had captioned it, "Homeless and Pregnant, How My Billionaire Sister-in-Law Kicked Us to the Curb." It was a masterclass in manipulation. In the video, Brittany sat on the floor of the nursery she had prematurely set up in my parents' house, surrounded by half-packed boxes. She wore no makeup, and her hair was tied in a messy bun. She held a sonogram photo in one hand and a tissue in the other. "Hey guys," she whispered into the camera, her voice trembling perfectly. "I did not want to do this. I really did not. But I do not know where else to turn. My husband and I and his elderly parents are being evicted today. We have nowhere to go. My sister-in-law, Tiana Williams, who owns the house and makes millions as a partner at Davis & Associates, decided she wants to sell it out from under us. She knows I am high risk. She knows my in-laws are on a fixed income, but she does not care. She told us money matters more than family." She wiped away a tear that she had carefully manufactured. "We offered to pay rent. We begged her for more time, but she served us with papers this morning. I am just so scared for my baby. If anyone knows of a shelter or a cheap motel that takes emergency cases, please DM me. We just need a miracle. The internet devoured it. By 1 p.m., the video had 50,000 views. By 2 p.m., it had 500,000. The comments section was a cesspool of outrage. People were tagging my firm. They were finding my professional profiles. They were calling for my head. How can an architect build homes for people while destroying her own family's home? One user wrote. Another commented, I hope she loses everything. Cancel Tiana. Williams began to trend locally. I felt the shift the moment I walked back into the office after a site visit. Usually the lobby of Davis and Associates was a place of warmth and respect for me. The receptionist knew my coffee order. The junior associates vied for my attention. Today, the air was frigid. The security guard lowered his eyes when I passed. Two interns huddled by the elevator stopped talking abruptly as I approached. They looked at me not with admiration, but with a mixture of fear and disgust. I got into the elevator alone. My phone vibrated with a notification from LinkedIn. Someone had commented on my promotion post from yesterday. It read, "Do you evict all your tenants when they get pregnant? Or just family?" I opened TikTok and saw the video. It was everywhere. My face was being plastered across the screens of strangers juxtaposed with Britney's tear-stained performance. I walked into my office and closed the door. My hands were steady, but my stomach churned. They had done it. They had weaponized their incompetence and turned it into victimhood. They were using the very platform I had subsidized to destroy me. Brittany was wearing a necklace I bought her for Christmas in the video. The boxes behind her were paid for with my credit card. The audacity was suffocating. But as I watched the view count tick upward, I realized something important. They had just made their biggest mistake. They had brought this into the public square, and in the public square, evidence is king. They thought they were destroying my reputation. In reality, they were just building the stage for their own execution. I watched Brittany sob into the camera lens for the third time. Most people would be panicking right now. My inbox was full of death threats. My LinkedIn was a war zone. People I had not spoken to in years were texting me to say they were disappointed. But I was not panicking. I was laughing. It was a dry, humorless sound that echoed off the glass walls of my office. I paused the video at the 28-second mark. If you looked closely, you could see the outline of the foam pad shifting under her shirt when she leaned forward to wipe a tear. It was a good performance, but it lacked structural integrity. Just like everything else in their lives. They had built a monument to their own victimhood, but they had built it on a foundation of sand. I picked up my burner phone. This was the line I used for business that required discretion. I dialed a number I had saved simply as the cleaner. He was a private investigator named Reynolds, who cost more than my mortgage and specialized in finding dirt that people thought was buried deep. I had hired him 6 months ago when Marcus started asking for larger sums of cash, claiming he was investing in crypto. I had a feeling then that something was wrong, but I never looked at the reports. I had been too busy building their mansion. Now I needed to see exactly what I had been financing. Reynolds picked up on the first ring. "I assume you saw the video," I said, swiveling my chair to look out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over Atlanta, but I felt like the sun was just rising on my truth. "I did." Reynolds' voice was gravelly and amused. "She has a future in soap operas. But you did not pay me to critique her acting. Check your secure email, Tiana. The full dossier is there, and you are going to want to be sitting down for this." I refreshed my inbox. A new email appeared with the subject line Project Golden Child. I clicked the attachment. It was a PDF thick with financial records, surveillance photos, and medical transcripts. I scrolled past the photos of Marcus leaving underground casinos in East Atlanta at 3 in the morning. I skipped the transcripts of his desperate calls to loan sharks begging for more time. I landed on page 15. There it was. The reason for the desperation. The reason they needed the house in their name immediately. Marcus was in the hole for $300,000 to a bookie in Buckhead. He had promised them the deed to the manor as collateral. He was not trying to build a home for his family, he was trying to save his own kneecaps. But that was not the best part. Reynolds spoke in my ear, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "Keep scrolling, Tiana. Look at page 20. I scrolled. It was a medical billing statement from a private clinic in Buckhead, dated 3 years ago. Patient Brittany Williams. Procedure bilateral tubal ligation. Elective, permanent. I felt a smile stretch across my face that was so wide it almost hurt. "She is not pregnant," I whispered, staring at the words. "Nope," Reynolds said. "She had her tubes tied before she even married him. She has been playing the long con. That baby bump is a high-end prosthetic she bought online. I found the receipt for that, too. She ordered it last week along with the waterproof mascara she used for her crying video." I closed the laptop. The silence in my office was heavy, but it was the silence of a predator who just realized the prey had walked into the cage and locked the door from the inside. They tried to destroy me with a lie. They tried to use the sympathy of strangers to force my hand, but they forgot that lies leave paper trails. And I just found the map. "Thank you, Reynolds," I said. "Send the bill. I am going to church on Sunday, and I have a testimony to share." I hung up. I looked at the notifications still flooding my phone, the world demanding I apologize to the poor pregnant woman. They wanted a show. They wanted a villain. Fine. I would give them a show they would never forget. But the twist ending was going to be a killer. At 2 p.m., the tranquility of the Davis & Associates lobby was shattered. Bernice marched through the revolving doors, not with the grace of a matriarch, but with the desperation of a cornered animal. She wore yesterday's clothes and her hair was fraying at the edges, a visual representation of her unraveling control. She stormed up to the front desk, slamming her hand on the polished granite. "I want to see Tiana Williams," she shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "Tell her to get down here right now. I know she is hiding in that glass tower while her family suffers." The receptionist, a young woman named Chloe, who idolized Tiana, blinked in shock. "Mom, do you have an appointment?" "Ms. Williams is in a partner meeting." "Appointment!" Bernice laughed, a shrill, hysterical sound. "I am her mother. I birthed her. I do not need an appointment to see my own child. Tell her to come down here and face me, or I will scream until every client in this building knows she is an ungrateful wretch who abandoned her sick parents." Security moved in immediately. The head guard, Mr. Washington, stepped between Bernice and the terrified receptionist. He was a large man with a gentle demeanor, one whom Tiana always greeted with a smile and a holiday bonus. He did not smile now. "Mrs. Williams," he said, his voice deep and firm, "you need to lower your voice. This is a place of business. Do not touch me." Bernice spat, backing away. "You work for her, do you not? Did she pay you to keep her mother out? Is that what my money is going solely to? Hiring thugs to keep me away?" Up on the 25th floor, I watched the scene unfold on the security feed on my monitor. My assistant looked at me, eyes wide. "Do you want me to call the police, Tiana?" she asked. "No," I said, reaching into my desk drawer. I pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. I had prepared it the moment Reynolds sent me the dossier. It was sealed with red wax, a dramatic touch I felt Marcus would appreciate. "Take this down to Mr. Washington. Tell him to give it to her. And tell him if she does not leave after she reads it, then he can call the police." I watched on the screen as my assistant handed the envelope to Mr. Washington. He took it and turned to my mother, who was now sobbing loudly about how I had left her homeless. "Ms. Williams will not be coming down," Mr. Washington said, cutting through her performance. "But she wanted you to have this." Bernice snatched the envelope, tearing it open with trembling hands. "What is this?" "A check." "Is it an apology?" She pulled out the stack of papers. They were not checks. They were transaction logs from the Velvet Room, an underground casino in Buckhead. Highlighted in neon yellow were the lines of credit extended to Marcus Williams secured against the future inheritance of the Williams estate. Total debt, $350,000. I watched her face crumble. She flipped the pages, seeing the promissory notes with Marcus' signature, the dates that aligned with every time he had asked me for investment capital. She froze. For a moment, the lobby was silent. Then she looked up at the security camera, her eyes wild. She did not look sorry. She looked terrified. "Please," she whispered, the fight draining out of her. "It is a mistake." He was tricked. "It is time to go, ma'am," Mr. Washington said, taking her elbow. This time she did not resist. She let him escort her out the revolving doors, clutching the proof of her golden child's wrought to her chest. I turned off the monitor. She still defended him. Even with the evidence in her hands, she blamed the world. But now she knew, and knowledge was a poison that would eat her alive. Bernice sat in the driver's seat of her car parked just around the corner from Tiana's office building. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned the color of old ivory. The envelope lay open on the passenger seat, the highlighted figures of $350,000 mocking her. She looked at the papers, then out the window, then back at the papers. Denial rose in her chest like bile. It was not true. It could not be true. Marcus was a businessman. He was a visionary. These casinos, these loan sharks, they had preyed on him. They saw a young, ambitious black man, and they set a trap to steal his future. He was tricked. She said aloud, the sound of her own voice fortifying her delusion. My boy was tricked. And if Tiana had just supported him like a sister, he never would have been in that position to begin with. This is her fault. She drove him to this desperation with her stinginess. She started the engine. The humiliation in the lobby still burned on her cheeks, but Bernice Williams was not a woman who accepted defeat. Tiana thought she was smart with her lawyers and her security guards and her dossiers. But Tiana forgot where she came from. She forgot who truly held the power in this community. It was not the bank, it was not the court, it was the Lord. And more specifically, it was Pastor Jenkins and the congregation of Greater Hope Baptist Church. Bernice merged into traffic, her mind racing with a new plan. Tiana could ignore a text message, she could block a phone call, she could even hide behind a security guard. But she could not hide from God, and she certainly could not hide from the judgment of the 500 people who had watched her grow up. Bernice picked up her phone and dialed the church office. "Pastor Jenkins," she said, her voice cracking with practiced sorrow when he answered. "This is Sister Bernice. I am calling with a heavy heart. The enemy is attacking my family pastor. My daughter Tiana, she has lost her way. She has been blinded by money and greed. She has turned against her own flesh and blood. We are facing homelessness, Pastor, and Marcus, her poor brother, is being targeted by wicked men because Tiana refuses to help him. We need an intervention. We need the church to stand in the gap." She listened as the pastor offered his condolences, his voice filled with righteous concern. Bernice smiled grimly. She had him. "I want to bring this before the altar on Sunday," she continued. "I want to call a family meeting right after the service. I want the deacons there. I want the elders there. I want Tiana to look into the eyes of the people who raised her and explain why she is choosing the world over her soul." By the time she hung up, the trap was set. Sunday service, the biggest audience of the week. Bernice sent a text to Tiana. No threats this time, no insults, just a simple biblical command. "The pastor requests your presence this Sunday. We are gathering to pray for your soul and for the restoration of this family. Do not disrespect the house of God. Be there at 11 a.m. Bernice looked at the text and smoothed her hair. Tiana would come. She had to. In their world, disobeying the church was social suicide. And when she arrived, Bernice would make sure the pressure was so intense that Tiana would break before the choir even finished the opening hymn. The call from Pastor Jenkins came on a Wednesday afternoon while I was selecting marble samples for a hotel lobby. I saw his name on the caller ID and I knew exactly what was happening. My mother had deployed the ultimate weapon. In the Black community, the pastor is not just a spiritual leader, he is the judge, the jury, and the executioner of social standing. To ignore him is to excommunicate yourself. I answered the phone, my voice calm and respectful. "Hello, Pastor Jenkins." "Tiana." His voice rumbled deep and grave, the same tone he used for funerals. "I have been speaking with your mother. She is in great distress. She tells me there is a spirit of division in your family. She says you have hardened your heart against your own kin. We are holding a special prayer session this Sunday after the service. A time for reconciliation. We expect you to be there." It was not a request. It was a summons. He was calling me to the carpet to be publicly shamed into submission. He expected me to crumble under the weight of religious guilt, to write a check just to stop the whispering in the pews. I did not crumble. I felt a slow, cold smile spread across my face. My mother had made a tactical error. She thought the church was her turf. She thought that by dragging this into the light of the sanctuary, she could force me into the shadows. But she forgot one thing. The church is a place of truth, and I was the only one holding any. "I will be there, Pastor," I said. "In fact, I would like to say a few words. I have a testimony I need to share with the congregation." The pastor sounded relieved, unaware he was agreeing to a demolition. "That is wonderful, Tiana. The truth shall set you free." I hung up and immediately canceled my brunch plans for Sunday. I had work to do. I drove home to the penthouse and went into my home office. I did not pack a Bible. Instead, I pulled down my portable high-definition projector and a collapsible screen. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop, simply titled Sunday Service. I began to drag and drop the files. First the PDF from the private investigator showing the medical records. I renamed it The Miracle Baby. Next, the surveillance photos of Marcus entering the casino. I renamed that one The Investment Strategy. Finally, I opened the audio files Reynolds had sent me just an hour ago. He had managed to bug the landline at my parents' house. I clicked play on the first file. Brittany's voice filled the room clear and sharp. "I cannot believe she fell for the cramping act. She is so gullible. Once we get the house back, I am turning her old room into a closet. She does not need to come visit." I paused the recording. It was perfect. The audio quality was crisp. It would sound wonderful over the church's expensive sound system. I packed everything into a discreet black duffel bag. My mother wanted a show. She wanted to use the audience to pressure me. She wanted a public spectacle. Well, I was going to give her one. I was going to give them a presentation so undeniable that not even the Holy Ghost could save them from the fallout. I zipped the bag shut. Sunday was going to be biblical, all right. It was going to be the book of Revelation. The air inside Greater Hope Baptist Church was thick enough to chew. It smelled of old hymnals, floor wax, and the heavy perfume of judgment. I walked in 5 minutes late, a calculated move that ensured every head in the sanctuary turned to watch me walk down the center aisle. The murmurs started immediately. I could hear the whispers rippling through the pews like a wave. "That is her. That is the one who evicted her mama. Shameful." I took a seat in the third row directly behind my family. They were already positioned in the front pew, staging a tableau of perfect suffering. Bernice was wearing a modest black dress that she usually reserved for funerals, looking small and frail. She dabbed at dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. Marcus sat next to her, his head bowed low, acting the part of the beaten man. And Brittany sat between them, wincing occasionally and rubbing her prosthetic bump with a performance that deserved an Academy Award. She looked pale and tragic, a martyr for the TikTok generation. Pastor Jenkins stepped up to the pulpit. He was a large man with a booming voice that commanded absolute silence. He gripped the sides of the wooden podium and looked out over the congregation. His eyes lingered on me for a long, uncomfortable moment before he opened his Bible. "Today, church, we are going to talk about a commandment that is often forgotten in this modern world of greed and selfishness." He paused for effect. Exodus 20:12. Honor your father and your mother so that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. A chorus of amens rang out from the deacon's corner. Bernice let out a loud, ragged sob and leaned into Marcus. The pastor continued, his voice rising in volume and intensity. There are some among us who have been blessed with wealth. They have been blessed with good jobs and fancy degrees. But what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul? What does it profit a daughter to live in a tower of glass while her parents sleep in the street? The air in the room grew hotter. He was not being subtle. He was publicly undressing me, flaying my character with scripture. The congregation turned to look at me again. Their gazes were heavy with accusation. I could feel the heat of their disapproval, the collective weight of 500 people who believed I was a monster. You cannot buy your way into heaven, the pastor roared, pounding the pulpit. And you cannot turn your back on the blood that created you. If you have abundance, it is your duty to share it. If you have strength, it is your duty to carry the weak. To do otherwise is a sin against God and a sin against nature. Bernice nodded vigorously, her hands raised in agreement. Brittany looked back at me over her shoulder, giving me a look of pure triumph disguised as pity. They thought they had me. They thought I would shrink down in the pew, shame-faced and broken, ready to sign any check to make the preaching stop. But I sat with my back straight and my hands folded in my lap. I watched the pastor wipe the sweat from his brow. I watched my mother bask in the sympathy of the crowd. I waited for the sermon to end. I waited for the offering plate to pass. Because when the service was over, the floor was mine. And unlike the pastor, I did not need parables. I had receipts. The choir finished the final note of the invitation hymn, and a heavy silence settled over the sanctuary. Pastor Jenkins scanned the room, waiting for a soul to come forward. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping against the floor was loud in the quiet room. I smoothed the lapels of my white tailored suit. It was a stark contrast to the drab mourning clothes my mother wore. I looked like the future. She looked like the past. I picked up my black duffel bag and walked into the aisle. Every eye was on me. I could hear the rustle of Sunday hats and the intake of breath. I walked with a steady rhythm, my heels clicking against the hardwood floor. I did not look down. I did not look ashamed. I walked straight to the pulpit where Pastor Jenkins stood. He looked down at me with a benevolent smile, thinking he had just saved a lost sheep. He thought his sermon had broken me. He thought he had used the word of God to humble the rich girl. "Sister Tiana," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "the Lord welcomes you home. Do you have something to say to your mother, to this congregation?" "Yes, Pastor," I said, my voice clear and projecting without the microphone. "I would like to ask for permission to speak. I have a confession to make, and I have an apology to offer." A collective sigh of relief swept through the room. I saw Bernice's shoulders drop. She turned to Marcus and squeezed his hand. I saw her mouth the words, "I told you." Brittany smirked, abandoning her act of pain for a moment to flash a look of pure gloating victory. They thought I was broken. They thought the social pressure had crushed me into submission. They were ready to accept my check and my groveling. They were already planning the victory dinner. The pastor stepped back and gestured to the microphone. "The floor is yours, daughter. Speak your heart. Let the Spirit move you." I stepped up to the podium. I placed my bag on the shelf underneath. I looked out at the faces of the people who had judged me based on a 30-second TikTok video. I looked at the deacons who had frowned at me when I entered. I looked at my family sitting in the front row like vultures waiting to pick the meat off my bones. "Thank you, Pastor," I began. "You are right. I have been holding back. I have been keeping secrets from this family and from this church. And for that I am truly sorry. I apologized for letting the darkness hide the truth. I apologized for allowing lies to fester in the house of the Lord." Bernice nodded emphatically, crying fresh tears of joy. She was already mentally spending the money she thought I was about to hand over. She stood up halfway, raising her hands in praise. Hallelujah, she shouted. God is good. Restored. I smiled at her. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Yes, he is, I said. And the truth shall set us all free. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop and the connector cable for the church's projection system. I plugged it in before anyone could stop me. The giant screen behind the choir loft flickered to life. The room went confusedly quiet. I am not here to apologize for my success, I said, my voice hardening into steel. I am here to apologize for protecting you from the consequences of your own actions, but that ends today. I gripped the sides of the wooden podium. The wood was cool under my palms, grounding me. I looked out at the sea of expectant faces. 500 people were holding their breath, waiting for the wealthy daughter to bow down. Bernice was dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, her body shaking with what looked like religious fervor, but what I knew was pure greed. She looked at me with eyes that said, "Pay up." Marcus was leaning back with a smug grin, his arms crossed over his chest. Brittany was still clutching her fake belly, her expression a mask of tragic victory. They were so sure. They were so confident that the script was written in stone. I leaned into the microphone. My voice echoed through the high, vaulted ceiling, clear and steady. I stand before you today to ask for forgiveness. A murmur of approval rippled through the pews. Several people shouted amen. I continued. I ask for forgiveness because I have allowed a lie to live in this holy place. I have allowed deception to fester in the heart of my family. I have protected sinners from the consequences of their actions, and in doing so I became a part of the sin. Bernice nodded vigorously, raising a hand to the heavens. Yes, Lord, she shouted. Speak it, Tiana. Let it out. I looked directly at her. My expression did not soften. I apologize because I should have done this years ago. I should have brought the light of truth to this darkness sooner. But better late than never. I reached into my bag. The pastor took a half step forward, his brow furrowing. Daughter, what are you doing? He asked, his voice low. I am testifying, Pastor, I said. You said the truth shall set us free. I am just providing the visual aid. I pulled out the HDMI cable I had prepared. It was a thick black cord that looked like a snake in the church light. I plugged one end into my laptop and the other into the port on the podium that controlled the massive projection screen behind the choir loft. A loud hum filled the sanctuary as the projector warmed up. The giant screen, which usually displayed hymn lyrics and Bible verses, flickered to life. It turned a bright, harsh blue before settling on the desktop of my computer. The file names were clearly visible in large, bold letters. Gambling debts. Fake pregnancy. Eviction truth. The room went deadly silent. The kind of silence that happens right before a car crash. The amen died in the deacon's throat. Bernice stopped nodding. Her hand froze in mid-air. Marcus sat up straight, his sunglasses sliding down his nose. Brittany stopped rubbing her stomach, her eyes darting from me to the screen. They did not understand what was happening yet, but the air had changed. The atmosphere of victory had evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sharp confusion. I tapped the trackpad on my laptop. The cursor moved on the giant screen, hovering over the first folder. I looked at the congregation. You wanted to know why I evicted my parents? I said, my voice hard as diamonds. You wanted to know why I refused to support my brother. You wanted to know the truth about my sister-in-law's condition. Well, here it is. I hovered the cursor over the audio file, named Voicemail Sunday, 8 p.m. I looked at my mother one last time. She was still holding her handkerchief halfway to her face, but her eyes had gone wide with a dawning horror. She knew what was coming. She tried to stand up. She tried to wave her hands to stop me. No, Tiana, she hissed. Do not do this. But it was too late. I pressed the enter key. My mother's voice exploded through the church estate of the art sound system. It was amplified to a deafening volume, bouncing off the stained glass windows and the high wooden beams. But it was not the sweet, trembling voice she had used 5 minutes ago to beg for prayers. It was the voice of a tyrant. It was cold, jagged, and dripping with venom. Tiana, you are out. The recording boomed. Do not come back. We are moving on as a family without you. We do not need your money or your attitude. You are dead to us until you fix this. Do not even think about stepping foot in my house again. The recording ended with a sharp click that echoed in the stunned silence of the sanctuary. For a moment, nobody moved. The silence was absolute. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The elderly sisters in the choir loft, who had been nodding along with the sermon just moments ago, sat with their mouths open. The deacons looked at the floor, uncomfortable and shifting in their seats. Pastor Jenkins looked from the screen to Bernice, his face a mask of confusion. I leaned into the microphone. You all heard that, right? I asked, my voice cutting through the shock. You heard the hate in that voice. You heard the finality. That was not a mother disciplining a child. That was a woman discarding a resource she could no longer control. That voicemail was left on my phone last Sunday night, less than a week ago. I looked down at Bernice. She had sunk back into the pew, her face an ashen gray. She looked small now, stripped of her martyr act. But I was not done. You dragged me here today to talk about abandonment, I continued. You told this congregation that I left you homeless, that I turned my back on my flesh and blood. But the truth is, you threw me out. You told me not to come back. You told me I was dead to you. And now that I have obeyed you, now that I have actually left you, want to cry victim. You want to use the church to shame me back into paying your bills. A murmur went through the crowd, but this time it was different. It was not against me. It was confused, angry. People were turning to look at Bernice with suspicion. Sister Williams, one woman whispered loud enough to be heard. Is that true? Did you put that girl out? Bernice stammered, trying to regain her footing. It is out of context, she cried, her voice rising in panic. She provoked me. She was disrespecting her father. I was just upset. It was just words I repeated. I clicked the next slide. Let us see if these are just words too. Because the eviction notice you waved around on TikTok, claiming I was a heartless landlord, has a backstory. And that backstory starts with a foreclosure notice from 5 years ago that you conveniently forgot to mention. I clicked the next file. The screen shifted from the audio waveform to a spreadsheet. But not just any spreadsheet. This was a forensic accounting of my finances for the last decade. The header read, Total Direct Financial Support to Williams Family, 2014-2024. In the center of the screen in bold red font was a single number, $852, $430. A gasp ripped through the congregation. It started in the front rows and rolled back like a tidal wave. Even Pastor Jenkins turned around, his eyes widening as he read the figure. That was nearly $1 million. In a neighborhood where the average income was $40,000 a year, that number was astronomical. It was lottery money. You called me greedy, I said, my voice steady. You told this church I was hoarding my wealth. You said I abandoned you, but the math says otherwise. I scrolled down. The spreadsheet was categorized. The first column was housing. I highlighted the entries. Mortgage payments for the Decatur house, $180,000. Property taxes, $45,000. Renovations, $60,000. I looked at my father. He was staring at his shoes, unable to meet the gaze of the deacon sitting next to him. I didn't just pay rent, Dad. I bought the house. I saved it when the bank came knocking 5 years ago. And you lived there for free, while I paid the insurance, the water, and the lights. I moved the cursor to the next column, lifestyle and luxury. The items here were more specific. Bernice Williams, Saks Fifth Avenue, $12,000. Bernice Williams, Waldorf Astoria Spa, $8,500. Brittany Williams, Neiman Marcus, $6,400. The murmurs in the room grew louder. People were pointing. A woman in the second row leaned forward and whispered loudly, "Is that why she always has a new hat every Sunday?" "You told everyone I was selfish because I stopped paying." I continued addressing the room. "But look at what I was paying for. These aren't medical bills, these aren't groceries, these are Chanel bags, these are spa days, these are designer shoes for a sister-in-law who refuses to work." Then I scrolled to the final column, the one labeled Marcus Williams, Miscellaneous. This list was different. It wasn't stores. It was cash withdrawals, Venmo transfers, auto repair shops that didn't exist. The total at the bottom of his column was over $300,000. "And here is the investment capital my brother needed," I said. $300,000. He told you he was a music producer. He told you he was an entrepreneur. I clicked a hyperlink on the spreadsheet. A scanned image of a promissory note popped up. It was from a known loan shark operation signed by Marcus. "The truth is, he's a gambler, and I have been paying his debts to keep his legs from getting broken." The sanctuary was in chaos now. The sympathy had evaporated completely. The congregation wasn't looking at a poor, evicted family anymore. They were looking at leeches. They were looking at people who had drained a young woman dry and then tried to destroy her character when the tap ran dry. I saw the shame burning on my mother's face. She wasn't crying anymore. She was shrinking. The number $850,000 hung over her head like a neon indictment, proving that her poverty was a choice to spend my money on, looking rich rather than being grateful. I stood there, allowing the murmur of the crowd to wash over me. The numbers on the screen were damning, but I knew how my community worked. There were still people in the back rows thinking that money was just money. They were thinking that families should forgive financial irresponsibility. They were thinking that maybe I was still being too harsh. I needed to show them the malice. I needed to show them the rot at the core of the fruit. I cleared my throat. "The numbers tell you what they cost me," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that the microphone caught and amplified perfectly. "But they do not tell you what they think of me. You see, I installed security cameras in the Decatur house 3 years ago. I did it because I was worried about my parents' safety. I wanted to make sure they were safe from break-ins. I never imagined that the thieves I needed to watch out for were sitting at the dinner table." I clicked the final file. The video player opened. The timestamp in the corner read, December 24th, Christmas Eve, just 2 months ago. The scene was the kitchen. Bernice was at the stove. Marcus and Brittany were sitting at the table drinking a bottle of wine that I had brought as a gift. I was not in the frame. I had left early that night to handle a crisis at a construction site. A crisis I later found out Marcus had caused by firing a contractor without my permission. On the massive screen, the audio cracked to life. Brittany was laughing, throwing her head back. "God, did you see her face when she gave us the checks?" she said, swirling her wine. "She actually thinks we are grateful." She looked like a puppy waiting for a treat. "It is pathetic, really." Marcus chuckled, peeling the label off the bottle. "She is not a puppy, babe. She is a cow. A big, dumb cash cow. As long as we keep milking her, she will keep producing. She is so desperate for Mom to love her, she will pay for anything. I could ask for a helicopter next week and she would probably buy it just to hear Mom say good job." The sanctuary was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. But the video continued. Brittany leaned in, her face twisted in a sneer. "Well, she better keep paying, because I'm not raising this baby in a dump. And when she gets old and burns out from all that work, we are putting her in the cheapest nursing home we can find. We will take power of attorney, declare her incompetent, and take the rest of the trust. She does not need it. She does not have a real family anyway." Marcus clinked his glass against hers. "To the nursing home plan, and to the stupidest architect in Atlanta. Cheers." I hit the spacebar, freezing the image on the screen. It was a freeze frame of their laughter, a portrait of pure, unadulterated hatred. I turned to look at the congregation. The shock had turned into something else. It was horror, pure visceral horror. to plan the demise of the person feeding you, to mock the loneliness of the person sheltering you. It was a level of evil that no sermon could justify. I looked down at my family. Brittany was pale, her hands shaking violently. Marcus had taken off his sunglasses and was staring at the floor, his arrogance completely stripped away. Bernice was weeping, but this time there was no performance. She was weeping because she knew it was over. The veil was lifted. I pointed at the frozen image of my brother and sister-in-law, toasting to my destruction. "That is the family you want me to honor," I said, my voice shaking with suppressed rage. "That is the brother you want me to save. That is the mother who claims she loves me. They do not love me. They love my utility. They love my checkbook. And they hate me for having the one thing they never will: dignity." I unplugged the cable. The screen went black. I packed my laptop into my bag and zipped it shut. The sound was like a gavel striking a sounding block. "I have nothing left to give them," I said to the silent room. "Not my money, not my time, and certainly not my forgiveness. I am done." I walked down the steps of the pulpit and headed for the aisle. Nobody moved to stop me. The Red Sea had parted, and I was walking through to the other side, leaving the Egyptians to drown in the truth they had invited in. I paused at the end of the aisle just as I was about to push through the double doors. The silence in the church was still heavy, a physical weight pressing down on the congregation. I turned around slowly. My mother was slumped in the pew, her face buried in her hands. Marcus was staring at the blank screen where his cruelty had just been broadcast. But Brittany was still sitting there, clutching her stomach, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat. She was still committing to the bit. She was still holding on to the one lie she thought could save them. I walked back toward the front row. The click of my heels was the only sound in the room. I stopped directly in front of Brittany. She looked up at me, defiance warring with panic in her eyes. "You are a monster," she hissed. "You ruined everything. My baby can feel my stress, Tiana. If I lose him, it is your fault." I reached into my bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was not a projection. It was a physical document stamped with the official seal of the North Atlanta Women's Health Clinic. I did not need a screen for this. I needed to look her in the eye. "There is no baby Brittany," I said, my voice quiet, but carrying to the back of the room. "There never was." Bernice looked up, confusion cutting through her misery. "What are you talking about?" "Of course there is a baby. We saw the sonogram." I handed the paper to Marcus. "Read it," I said. "Read the date. Read the procedure code." Marcus took the paper, his hands shaking so hard the page rattled. He squinted at the medical jargon. "Bilateral tubal ligation." He read slowly, his voice trembling. "Date of procedure: August 12, 2021. I looked at the congregation. For those of you who are not medical professionals, that means Brittany had her tubes tied 3 years ago. It is a permanent sterilization procedure. She cannot get pregnant. She has not been pregnant. That bump she is rubbing is made of foam and latex. I have the receipt for that too if you want to see it." Marcus dropped the paper. He turned to his wife, his face a mask of pure betrayal. "You got fixed," he whispered. "You told me we were trying. You told me this was our ticket. You told me we needed the house for the nursery." Brittany scrambled backward in the pew, her hands flying to her stomach, instinctively protecting the lie. "It is not true," she shrieked. "She forged it. She is lying, Marcus. She is trying to turn you against me." "Show us then," I said. I crossed my arms. "If I am lying, lift up your shirt. Show the church the miracle of life. Show your husband the child he is fighting for." Brittany froze. The entire church leaned forward. The air crackled with tension. She looked at Marcus, then at Bernice, then at the pastor. She saw no sanctuary. She saw only judgment. She did not lift her shirt. Instead, she burst into tears, real ugly tears of defeat, and buried her face in Marcus' shoulder. "Get off me!" Marcus roared. He shoved her away so hard she hit the back of the pew. He stood up, looking wildly around the room, looking for an exit, looking for a way to salvage his ego. But there was nowhere to go. The realization hit him like a physical blow. There was no heir. There was no legacy. There was no house. And now everyone knew he was not just a squatter, but a fool who had been played by his own wife. He collapsed back onto the bench, putting his head between his knees, letting out a guttural sound of despair. Bernice stared at Brittany as if she were seeing a stranger. The golden future she had imagined, the grandchild who would carry on the name, the leverage she had used against me, it was all smoke. I looked at the three of them, broken and turning on each other in the ruins of their own deception. I picked up the medical record from where Marcus had dropped it. I placed it gently on the pew next to my mother. "Consider that my baby shower gift," I said. I turned and walked out of the church, and this time I did not look back. The doors swung shut behind me, muffling the sound of the chaos erupting inside. I walked into the bright Sunday sunlight, took a deep breath of fresh air, and finally felt free. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind me, sealing the sanctuary in a momentary vacuum of silence. Then the explosion happened. I could hear it even from the vestibule, a roar of voices rising in shock and outrage. Inside the church, the order of service had collapsed into anarchy. Brittany was the first to break. The evidence had stripped her naked in front of 500 people, and panic overrode her logic. She needed to silence the truth. She needed to regain control of the narrative before the live stream clips started circulating. She scrambled out of the pew, shoving Marcus aside with a strength that betrayed her delicate condition. "That is a lie." She screamed, her voice shrill and breaking. She forged it all. "I am pregnant. I am carrying the heir." She lunged toward the pulpit, her eyes fixed on the microphone that was still live. She wanted to scream over the facts. She wanted to drown out the truth with volume. But in her haste, she forgot the physics of her own deception. As she mounted the steps to the altar, the heel of her designer shoe caught on the edge of the carpet. She went down hard. It was an ugly, ungraceful fall. She landed flat on her stomach with a sickening thud that echoed through the speakers. In any other circumstance, the deacons would have rushed forward to assist a pregnant woman. The mothers of the church would have gasped in horror. But today, nobody moved. The front row sat frozen in a mix of shock and morbid curiosity. Brittany lay on the floor, gasping for air. The impact had done what my words could not fully do. It physically dismantled the lie. The straps holding her prosthetic bump had snapped. As she tried to push herself up, the foam belly slid upward, lodging unnaturally near her ribcage. Her shirt bunched up, revealing the smooth, flat skin of her stomach underneath. The gasp that went through the room sucked the oxygen out of the air. There was no denying it now. The miracle baby was nothing but plastic and padding. Brittany looked up, scanning the room for an ally. She found only disgust. She tried to pull her shirt down to cover the plastic lump, but it was too late. The verdict had been delivered. Bernice watched the scene unfold from the pew. She saw the empty medical record. She saw her son staring blankly at the floor, broken by the revelation that he had been played. She saw her daughter-in-law exposed as a fraud on the altar of God. The shame was a physical weight crushing her chest. She knew she could not fight the facts. She had one card left to play. "Oh, Jesus," she wailed, throwing her head back. "My heart. It is my heart." She clutched her chest with theatrical precision. She checked her landing zone, ensuring she would hit the padded pew cushion and not the hard wood. Then she slumped sideways, letting her body go limp. It was a performance that might have worked yesterday. But today the audience was cynical. "She is faking it," a voice rang out from the choir loft. "Just like the pregnancy." Pastor Jenkins finally snapped out of his paralysis. He looked at the chaos erupting in his sanctuary. He saw smartphones recording. He saw the dignity of his church crumbling. He scrambled for the control panel on the pulpit, his fingers fumbling with the switches. "Cut the mic." He shouted to the sound booth, his voice cracking with panic. "Cut the feed. Clear the sanctuary. Get the deacons down here." He slammed his hand on the master power button. A sharp squeal of feedback pierced the air, forcing the congregation to cover their ears. The speakers went dead, the screens went black. But the silence did not fix anything. The image of the Williams family lying amidst the wreckage of their own greed was already burned into the minds of everyone present. The service was ended. The reckoning had just begun. I stood at the podium for one final second. The image of the family I once served lay shattered on the floor, but I felt no urge to help them pick up the pieces. The chaos was rising around them. Brittany on the floor, Bernice feigning death, Marcus catatonic, but I held the room's attention for one last breath. I leaned into the microphone before the pastor could cut the feed, ensuring my voice reached every corner of the sanctuary. "Pastor Jenkins," I said, my voice cutting through the rising noise like a blade. "You spent an hour preaching to me about duty. You quoted Exodus to shame me into submission, but you conveniently forgot the 8th commandment." I looked directly at my parents, then at the congregation that had judged me so harshly just an hour ago. "Thou shalt not steal." I recited the words heavy and absolute. God teaches us not to take what is not ours. You didn't just steal my money, you stole my trust. You stole my vulnerability. You stole 10 years of my life pretending to love me only when the check cleared. I paused, letting the weight of the accusation settle. "I am done being your victim. I am done being your bank, and I am done being your daughter, in name only." I straightened my spine, feeling lighter than I had in a decade. From this moment on, the Bank of Tiana is closed. But more importantly, the cage is open. I am not abandoning this family. I am setting myself free. I unplugged the laptop cable with a final decisive snap. I stepped down from the pulpit and began the long walk down the center aisle. The reaction was instantaneous, but it was not the chaos that consumed the front row. As I passed the pews, the congregation fell silent. The whispers stopped. The judgment vanished. The elderly mothers of the church, the deacons, the choir members, they didn't look at me with scorn anymore. They looked at me with something I had never received in this building: respect. They saw the strength it took to stand alone. They saw the truth I had unveiled. As I walked, people actually pulled their feet back to clear my path. A man in the back row, a stonemason I had known since childhood, gave me a slow, solemn nod. I didn't look back at the altar. I didn't look back at the screaming woman on the floor or the mother playing dead. I kept my eyes on the double doors at the end of the aisle. The bright rectangle of sunlight waiting for me looked like a portal to a new life. I pushed the doors open and stepped out into the fresh air. Behind me, the noise of the church faded into a dull roar, but out here on the pavement, there was only silence. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace. 1 week later, the silence I had walked into outside the church had been replaced by the deafening roar of the internet. I did not record the service. I did not have to. In a room of 500 people, someone always hits record. By Monday morning, the clip titled "The Exposing of the Williams Family" had 3 million views on TikTok. By Wednesday, it was on the national news. The angle was grainy shot from the choir loft, but the audio was crystal clear. The world heard my mother's hateful voicemail. They saw the spreadsheet of debt. But the moment that broke the internet was Brittany's fall. The split second when her prosthetic bump slid up to her throat was slowed down, zoomed in, and turned into the most viral meme of the year. The hashtag #FakeBump was trending higher than the Super Bowl. For Brittany, the fallout was nuclear. The internet detectives were ruthless. They found her old party photos from dates she claimed to be bedridden. They found the receipt for the foam belly. The Mommy and Me boutique that had sponsored her Instagram posts issued a public statement severing all ties. Her comment section was a war zone of clown emojis and demands for apologies. She tried to go live once to explain herself, but the backlash was so vitriolic, she deactivated her accounts within 5 minutes. She was not just canceled. She was erased from the social hierarchy she desperately craved. But while Brittany was fighting a digital war, Marcus was facing a much more physical threat. The insulation I had provided him was gone, and the wolves had noticed. At the Decatur house, the lights were off. They were hiding. Marcus sat in the living room, the curtains drawn tight, terrified of every car that passed by. He knew the gambler's code. You can stall a bank. You cannot stall a bookie. At 2 in the morning, a heavy object smashed through the front window, shattering the glass and the silence. Marcus scrambled off the couch, his heart hammering against his ribs. He crawled across the floor, avoiding the shards of glass. A brick lay on the rug, wrapped in a note. He did not need to read it to know what it said. But he picked it up anyway, his hands trembling. The sister bank is closed. You have 48 hours. Cash, or we take it in bone. He heard a car engine idle outside, then drive away slowly. He peeked through the blinds. A black SUV with tinted windows was turning the corner. Panic, cold and sharp, seized him. He grabbed his phone and dialed the only number he thought could save him. He dialed Tiana. The call went straight to voicemail. But it was not the old voicemail. It was a new automated message, crisp and professional. You have reached Tiana Williams. If this is a business inquiry, please contact my assistant. If this is a personal call, please note that my number has changed. Goodbye. Marcus dropped the phone. He looked at the brick. He looked at the dark house that they were being evicted from in 3 weeks. He realized then that Tiana was not punishing them to teach a lesson. She was not playing a game. She had simply removed herself from the equation. And without her standing between him and the consequences of his actions, Marcus was a dead man walking. The realization brought him to his knees, not in prayer but in sheer, paralyzed terror. The 30-day clock ran out at exactly 8 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday. There was no fanfare and no dramatic showdown, just the heavy, authoritative pounding on the front door that signaled the end of an era. Otis opened the door, wearing his bathrobe, looking aged and defeated. Standing on the porch was the DeKalb County Sheriff, accompanied by 3 deputies and a crew of movers hired by the bank. Mr. Williams, the sheriff said, adjusting his hat to block the drizzle. The deadline has passed. The writ of possession is active. We need you to vacate the premises immediately. Bernice came rushing down the hallway, clutching her robe. She looked around, expecting to see Tiana walking up the driveway to stop this. She expected the miracle she had relied on for a decade. But the driveway was empty except for the sheriff's cruiser and a moving truck. "You cannot do this!" Bernice shrieked. "My daughter owns this house. This is a family dispute. It is a misunderstanding." The sheriff pulled a folded document from his pocket. The owner listed is TW Holdings, LLC. They have been very clear, Mrs. Williams. There is no misunderstanding. You have been given the legal notice. You have 10 minutes to gather your personal essentials. The movers will handle the rest of the furniture. If you refuse to leave, we will have to escort you out for trespassing. The reality hit them like a physical blow. The deputies stepped inside their boots, muddying the carpet Bernice had paid for with Tiana's credit card. They watched helplessly as strangers began lifting the sofa, taking down the pictures and packing their lives into cardboard boxes. The neighbors stood on their porches watching the spectacle. The Williams family, the ones who always bragged about their daughter's success, were being put out on the curb. Otis sat on a plastic cooler in the driveway, the rain soaking through his thin clothes. He pulled out his phone, his fingers trembling. He dialed Tiana's number one last time. He did not know what he would say. Maybe he would apologize. Maybe he would beg. The line clicked, but it was not a ring. A mechanical operator voice spoke cold and indifferent. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service. Please check the number and try again." "She changed it," Otis whispered. He looked at Bernice, who was fighting with a deputy over a box of china. "She changed the number, Bernice. She is gone." They loaded what they could into Otis's old sedan, which was the only vehicle left after Marcus's Range Rover had been repossessed. They drove away from the ranch house, leaving 30 years of memories and entitlement behind. They did not drive to a new subdivision. They did not drive to a hotel. They drove 5 miles south to the Starlight Motor Inn. It was a place where the neon sign flickered ominously, and the air smelled of stale cigarettes and exhaust. Otis paid for a week with the last of his pension check. They carried their bags into the room. It was small, dark, and damp. The carpet was stained and the wallpaper was peeling in the corners. There was no media room. There was no walk-in closet. There was just a sagging double bed and a window that looked out onto a parking lot filled with rusted cars. Bernice sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The denial finally broke. The anger finally drained away, leaving only a hollow, terrifying clarity. This was not a temporary setback. This was their life now. Tiana was not coming. The safety net was gone. And for the first time in her life, Bernice realized that the cold rain falling outside was warmer than the future facing them. The collapse of the Williams dynasty did not end with a bang, but with the slamming of a trunk in the rain. Outside the Starlight Motor Inn, Brittany was shoving her suitcases into the back of her beat-up Honda Civic. It was the only asset she had left solely in her name. Marcus stood in the doorway of their cramped room, watching her wearing a stained t-shirt and a look of disbelief. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked, his voice raspy from a night of panic attacks. "You cannot just leave. We are in this together." Brittany spun around, her eyes cold and hard. "Together. There is no together, Marcus. There is no house. There is no trust fund. There is just you and a $300,000 debt to a loan shark. I am not sticking around to watch your kneecaps get broken." "You were the one with the fake belly," Marcus shouted, stepping into the rain. "You were the one who tripped in the church. You made us a laughingstock. And you were the one who was supposed to handle your sister." Brittany spat back. "You said she was a pushover. You said she would never check the books. You are not a businessman, Marcus. You are a leech, and now the host is gone." She got into the driver's seat and slammed the door. She did not look back as she peeled out of the parking lot, leaving her husband standing in a puddle with nothing but the clothes on his back and a target on his head. 2 hours later, Brittany pulled up to a modest siding house in a working-class suburb. It was the home she had fought so hard to escape. She walked up the steps and knocked. Her father opened the door. He did not smile. He did not open the screen door. "We saw the video, Brittany," he said. "The whole neighborhood saw it." "Can I come in, Dad?" Brittany asked, her voice small. "I have nowhere else to go." He sighed, a sound of deep disappointment. "You can stay in the guest room. But there will be rules. You are getting a job, you are paying rent, and you are keeping your head down. We do not want that drama here." Brittany walked past him, dragging her suitcase into the house that smelled of boiled cabbage and failure. She was back where she started. Across town, Marcus was learning a different kind of lesson. The threat from the bookie was real, and the 48-hour deadline was ticking. He had pawned his watch. He had sold his designer sneakers. It was not enough. Desperate, he had gone to a temp agency that placed day laborers. Now he was standing on a construction site in South Atlanta. It was 90 degrees and humid. He was wearing a neon yellow vest and steel-toed boots that were 2 sizes too big. His job was to haul 50-pound bags of concrete mix from a truck to a mixing station. "Hey, Hollywood, move it!" the foreman shouted, spitting tobacco juice near Marcus' boots. "We are not paying you to model the vest. Pick up the pace." Marcus bent down and grabbed a bag. His hands, soft from a lifetime of lotion and leisure, slipped against the rough paper. He gritted his teeth and heaved it onto his shoulder. The weight was crushing. His back screamed in protest. Dust filled his nose and throat, making him cough. He walked the 50 yards to the mixer, his legs trembling. He had watched Tiana visit sites like this for years. He had stood in the air-conditioned trailer while she walked the perimeter in her hard hat, commanding respect. He had thought it was easy. He had thought she just pointed at things. He dropped the bag and wiped sweat from his eyes. His hands were already blistering. His muscles were on fire. And it was only 10 in the morning. He looked at the other men working silently around him. They were building something real. He had spent his whole life trying to build an image. Now the image was gone, and for the first time in 30 years, Marcus Williams had to sweat for his survival. He picked up another bag. It was heavy, but the debt hanging over his head was heavier. The unfinished skeleton of the manor stood against the Atlanta sky like a monument to hubris. But today it was no longer my problem. A convoy of black SUVs rolled onto the dusty lot, and a man stepped out, wearing enough diamond chains to finance a small country. It was King J, a platinum-selling rapper who was looking for a compound to match his ego. He walked the perimeter, nodding at the half-poured foundation. He liked the scale. He liked the privacy. But mostly he liked that he could buy it cash and finish it his way. We stood by his car while his entourage reviewed the blueprints. "I will take it," King J said, shaking my hand. "The price is steep, but the location is prime. The price is fair." I corrected him with a smile. "You are not just buying land. You are buying the permit approvals, the architectural plans, and the freedom to build a fortress." We signed the papers on the hood of his car. When the wire transfer hit my account an hour later, I did not feel a thrill of greed. I felt a sense of heavy finality. I had recovered the $2.5 million I had sunk into that pit. My family wanted that house to be their stage. Now it would be a stranger's playground, and I was walking away with the proceeds. I knew exactly where the money was going. I did not buy a new car. I did not upgrade my penthouse. I called the dean of the Georgia Tech School of Architecture. 2 days later, I sat in his office and handed him a check for $2 million. "We are calling it the Tiana Williams Blueprint Initiative," I told him. "Full-ride scholarships for women of color from underrepresented communities. I want to pay for their tuition, their supplies, and their housing. I want to build a generation of women who own their own foundations so they never have to depend on anyone else." The dean was stunned. "This will change lives, Tiana. This is a legacy." That night at the fundraising gala to launch the initiative, I stood on the balcony holding a glass of champagne. The air was crisp, and the city lights below looked like scattered jewels. A shadow fell over me. I turned to see Julian, the senior litigation partner who had worked with David on the eviction proceedings. He was tall, with broad shoulders, and a quiet confidence that filled the space without dominating it. He had been the one to find the loophole in the deed transfer that made the eviction bulletproof. "You look like a woman who just conquered the world," Julian said, resting his arms on the railing. "I feel like a woman who just cleaned out her closet," I replied. "It is nice to have space to breathe." He turned to face me, his expression serious but warm. "You did good today, Tiana. Most people would have taken that money and bought an island. You built a ladder for others to climb. That is rare." "It was necessary," I said. "I spent 10 years building houses for people who wanted to tear me down. It is time I build something that lasts." Julian smiled, a slow, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "You know I have a rule about not dating clients. But technically the case is closed. The eviction is finalized. And I would really like to take you to dinner. Somewhere quiet. No drama, no legal briefs. Just two successful people enjoying a meal." I looked at him. For the first time in forever, I did not see a man who needed a loan. I did not see a man who wanted a favor. I saw an equal. I saw a partner. "I would like that," I said, clinking my glass against his. The city buzzed below us, alive and full of possibility. My phone was silent. My bank account was mine. My heart was open. And as I looked at Julian, I realized that for the first time in my life, I was not just building a structure. I was building a life. The Delta Sky Club at Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was a sanctuary of hushed conversations and the clinking of expensive glassware. I sat in a velvet armchair holding a chilled glass of champagne. Across from me, Julian was reading the Financial Times, his hand resting casually on my knee. We were 45 minutes away from boarding a first-class flight to Paris. It was our first real vacation together. For the last 6 months, my life had been a whirlwind of award ceremonies, scholarship galas, and quiet dinners with a man who actually asked me how my day was. My phone buzzed on the marble table. I glanced at it. The screen displayed a local area code but no name. A blocked number. Usually I would let it go to voicemail. I had become an expert at filtering out the noise of my past. But today, sitting there in my cashmere travel wrap, feeling untouchable, a flicker of curiosity sparked in my chest. I wanted to know if the ghosts were still haunting the graveyard I had left behind. I picked up the phone. This is Tiana. For a moment, there was only the sound of heavy, wet breathing. Then a cough rattled through the speaker, a sound so deep and phlegmy it made me flinch. Tiana, the voice whispered. It was raspy and thin, like dry leaves scraping against pavement. Is that you, baby girl? It took me a second to place the voice. It sounded decades older than the woman I knew. It was Bernice. But the imperious strength was gone, the arrogance was gone. All that was left was a terrified old woman. Hello, Bernice, I said. My voice was calm. My heart rate did not spike. I did not feel the old familiar rush of panic. Oh, thank God, she sobbed. The sound was pathetic. Tiana, you have to help us. It is your father. He is sick. He is so sick, Tiana. I took a sip of my champagne. If he is having a medical emergency, you should call 911. Medicaid covers the ambulance. They will not take him, she cried. We owe the hospital money. Tiana, listen to me. It is the room. We are still at the Starlight. The heater is broken. It is 40 degrees in here. The dampness is getting into his lungs. He is coughing up blood. We are freezing. I am wrapped in 3 blankets and I can still see my breath. I looked out the window at the jumbo jets taxiing on the runway. I imagined the Starlight motor in. I imagined the mold on the walls. I imagined the cold seeping into their bones. A year ago, this call would have broken me. I would have rushed over with a heater and a checkbook. I would have apologized for their suffering. But then I remembered the video. I remembered the laughter as they planned to put me in a home. I remembered that they had lived in luxury for 10 years and saved nothing. Please, Tiana, Bernice begged, her voice breaking. Just one night at a hotel with heat. Just some money for medicine. He is your father. I am your mother. We are suffering. I set my glass down. I looked at Julian. He had looked up from his paper, his eyes filled with concern, ready to support whatever decision I made. I smiled at him reassuringly. I am sorry to hear that, I said into the phone. But winter is cold, Bernice. That is just a fact of nature. You had 10 summers to prepare for this. You spent them all buying shade instead of building shelter. Tiana, please, she wailed. Do not be cruel. I am not being cruel, I said. I am being free. I have a flight to catch. Goodbye, Bernice. I ended the call. I did not just hang up. I opened the settings and blocked the number. Then I turned the phone off completely and dropped it into my designer bag. Is everything okay? Julian asked, touching my hand. I looked at the departure board. The flight to Paris was boarding. Everything is perfect, I said, standing up. It was just a wrong number. We walked toward the gate, hand in hand, leaving the cold and the past on the other side of the ocean. Bernice was still rambling on the other end of the line, her voice a mixture of mucus and panic. She was listing grievances and symptoms, trying to weave a net of guilt strong enough to pull me back from the edge of the Atlantic. She spoke of the cold. She spoke of the damp walls of the motel. She spoke of family duty. She was begging me to be the savior I had always been. I listened for a moment longer, letting her words wash over me like rain against a window pane. I felt nothing, no guilt, no anger, no pity. Just a calm, detached observation of a cycle finally breaking. Mom, I said, cutting through her sobbing. My voice was soft, but it possessed the finality of a judge slamming a gavel. Stop. She fell silent, hiccuping on the other end. Tiana, she whispered, hope creeping back into her tone. You will help us. I knew you would. You are a good girl. I am a good girl. I agreed. My eyes fixed on the departure board where the flight to Paris was flashing, now boarding. I am the best daughter in the world. And because I am so respectful, I have decided to honor your wishes completely. What? What are you talking about? Do you remember the voicemail you left me, Bernice? The one I played for the whole church? You were very specific. You said, Tiana, do not come back. You said I was out. You said you were moving on without me. There was a strangled noise on the line. Tiana, that was just anger. I did not mean it. But you said it. I interrupted. And I listened. You told me to leave, so I left. You told me not to look back, so I am looking forward. I am doing exactly what you told me to do. I am obeying my mother, and I will continue to obey that command for the rest of my life. You wanted me gone. Congratulations, Mom. You got what you wanted. I pulled the phone away from my ear. I could hear her screaming my name, a tiny, tinny sound that seemed to belong to a different universe. I pressed the red button ending the call. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. Julian watched me, his expression unreadable but supportive. Are you ready? He asked. Not quite, I said. I reached up and removed my gold hoop earring. I used the sharp post to press into the pinhole on the side of my phone. The SIM tray popped out with a soft click. I pulled out the small plastic chip. It was such a tiny thing, a sliver of copper and plastic, but it held the contact list of every person who had ever used me. It held the history of the abuse. It was the digital leash that kept me tied to a dead life. I walked over to the metal trash can standing next to the entrance of the first-class lounge. I held the chip over the opening for a fraction of a second. Then I let go. It tumbled down into the darkness, landing among the discarded coffee cups and old newspapers. I slid the empty tray back into my phone. It was just a camera and a music player now. No one could reach me. I was a ghost to them. I walked back to Julian and took his hand. We walked out of the lounge and toward the security checkpoint. The TSA agent smiled as I approached. Passport and boarding pass, please. I handed them over. The name on the ticket read, Tiana Williams, but I felt like a stranger to that name. I felt like someone entirely new. Have a great flight, the agent said, waving me through. I stepped through the metal detector. I did not beep. I carried no baggage. I carried no guilt. I looked at the long corridor stretching out before me, leading to the jetway, leading to Paris, leading to the rest of my life. A smile spread across my face. It was not the polite, practiced smile I had worn for years to hide my pain. It was a radiant, genuine smile that reached all the way to my soul. I was flying, and I was never coming down. Tiana's journey reveals a profound truth. Biological ties are not a license for exploitation. For a decade, she confused financial enabling with love, only to discover that you cannot save people who are committed to their own destruction. Her story teaches us that setting boundaries is not an act of cruelty, but a necessary act of survival. You are not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep ungrateful people warm. True freedom begins the moment you realize your worth is not defined by what you provide, but by who you are. Sometimes walking away is the strongest step forward. If Tiana's strength inspired you, share this story to empower someone else to reclaim their peace today.